The video that we're going to watch now has two purposes. Firstly, this is used for Year 10, current Year 10, to help them with the dirt time that they will be doing on their last assessment. This is their AP4 second assessment. So this is to help those people who've just sat this as an assessment to go over and have a look at what they need to do again. I'm also suggesting that this is really useful for Year 11 because it will give you a chance to have a look at some of the answers that have been given by Year 10s and also give you an opportunity to see what my answers would be for these questions. So you can see from the picture here that there are two questions that you've had to answer. The first is a 6-mark question, which is based on the source. You can see there, source D. And the second is a 10-mark question asking how far the German working class benefited from Nazi rule. So let's focus on this first source at the moment. Now, as we all know, the first things that we need to have a look at is the provenance of the source, which we can find just here. So this is an anonymous letter written in 1938 by a German civil servant about Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass. It was sent to the British government representative in Berlin. So we know that this is being sent by someone in the Nazi government, a civil servant, to the British government representative in the city. Okay, so secondly, we need to have a look at the source itself and see what it says. So I'm just going to read it out for you. I feel I should give you a true report of the recent riots, plundering and destruction of Jewish property. Despite what the official Nazi account says, the German people had nothing whatever to do with these riots and burnings. The police supplied SS men with axes, housebreaking tools and ladders. A list of all Jewish shops and homes was provided, and the mob worked under the leadership of SS men. The police had strict orders to remain neutral. So this is going against the idea. Now, the Nazis, after Kristallnacht in 1938, the Nazis said that this was a night of complete anger and destruction made by the German people as response to a murder in Paris. Now, reports went to Germany that a Jewish man had killed a high-ranking Nazi official in Paris, and the Nazi story is that the German people were so angered by this that everybody in lots of different cities all across Germany spontaneously rose up and went and attacked Jewish shops and homes, killing 100 people and burning down lots and lots of synagogues. Okay, so that's what the Nazis are going around telling everybody. What this source is explaining is that actually that isn't true. And although the Nazis are saying that German people did it, we can see that actually it's the responsibility of the SS and the SA. And sorry, just the SS. So what we can see here is an anonymous letter going against what the Nazis have said. Now, the things that I think are important here is firstly that it's anonymous, which means that the person who's made it is afraid of coming forward. It's 1938, so we know it's been made at the time, and it's very specific, so there's things in this source that I can quote. So now that we've had a look at this source, we can see that we are being asked at the bottom just here, are you surprised by this source? Use the source and your knowledge, that's the important bit, knowledge, to explain your answer. Okay, so let's have a look at what some of my pupils have said. So I'm sorry if you recognise your handwriting, but I'm going to refer to you as pupil 1 because I want these answers to remain anonymous. Just to talk you through the marking policy that you can see here, green is good and pink is something that you need to think about again. So let's have a look at this person's answer for question 1. It says, I am not surprised by this source, as considering the police were Nazis and followed Hitler, it isn't surprising what happened. The German people didn't have anything to do with the riots. Shows that Hitler decided what happened to the Jews, and the German people had to follow it if they wanted a life. I'm not surprised, as Hitler decided what happened to them. Now, I can see what this person was trying to say. One thing that I do really like is that they've got point evidence explain judgment link at the top of their page. So I know that they've been taking that into account. And I can see their linking sentence at the end here, which links back to the question, which is the kind of thing that we should be doing. So it's not that this person isn't paying attention or isn't working hard. I think that they are. But they're missing a few key bits. So let's have a look at the structure of this answer to see if we've got everything that we need. So firstly, they've got their point, which I like. I am not surprised by this source. As considering the police were followed by Hitler isn't surprising what happened. Now, I get a bit confused there. So they're right in saying that they're not surprised by the source because it isn't surprising, it's true. But what they're missing is a clear reason as to why. I can see that they're using the source a little bit, which is their evidence here. But they're missing an explanation, aren't they? So I don't know why the Nazis are doing what they're doing, or what the reason might be, or why this person has to speak anonymously. What we have here is kind of a typical example of somebody who's not sure how to answer the question, trying to answer the question. So I suggest that this person needs to go and remind themselves of their Kristallnacht knowledge and start putting some of that in the middle here, because we've got a beginning and we've got an end, because we've got a link here, but I just don't think that there's some evidence, but there's very little explanation, and there's no judgment about this source. So that's why I've only given this person 2 out of 6 for their answer. While we're here, let's have a look at their answer to the 10-mark question. So just to remind you, the 10-mark question was, did working class people benefit from under Nazi rule, or something along those lines? And so let's see what they've said for this one. So some German working class people benefited the Nazi rule a lot, but some didn't. The people that did were the ones that got more food for their families to eat, as they were promised work and bread, which meant as well as food, they got money to spend on food too. People didn't benefit the Nazi rule were the people that had their job taken away from them and given a horrible job, which was worse pay than they used to have. And the end of it is overall more people benefited, and this is shown as Hitler, since being in charge, decreased the unemployment chart by millions of people. Also, one way or another, they still had some job. Now, I've given this 3 out of 10 because I was feeling quite nice, but the thing is, structurally, there are issues here. It's not written grammatically correctly, and you will lose marks on a 10-mark question for that. So the sentences should read, people didn't always benefit from Nazi rule, as there were people who lost their jobs. So I think that this person needs to go back and really read through their answers to make sure that they make sense as they go through. And one thing that I need to be very clear on is that we don't use didn't, we use did not. And so this person is missing the 3 marks that they would have gained for spelling, grammar and punctuation, because they've put didn't, and they've got some spelling mistakes in there as well. So unfortunately, that is a real downside. Again, this answer doesn't have any subject knowledge, and so you can see that I've put that in my comments down here. There is no subject specific knowledge. Now, Year 10, I know that in your lessons we have recently gone through the Strength Through Joy programme, which was a good thing. We've gone through the banning of trade unions and the Nazi alternatives to trade unions and working conditions. We've looked at Hitler's promise, work and bread, which I can see this person has used, so that's good. But there is no subject knowledge here. This person hasn't talked about the military increasing or anything like that. And so really, there is a lot missing from these answers, which is why this person has got an F for their last assessment. So if you can see any similarities between your answer here your answer and this one here, then you can start to make those changes now. Okay, so this is pupils 2, and you can see these answers are quite short, but I think their handwriting is quite little as well. Good things in this, but also some downsides in this as well. So let's read their answer for question 1. I'm not surprised by this source because it was written by a German civil servant. So the writer wants the German people to not be blamed. Okay. When it was actually the police who supplied SS men with the weapons to destroy Jewish property, capital J for Jewish. I think that the Nazis wanted to blame the German people instead, so I don't think this source is surprising. Okay, right, I can see the motive that's been put there, and so we've got some notion of provenance. They've understood the message of the source, which they've explained and I've highlighted in green. But overall, there's no own knowledge here. I think actually I'm going to have to change that mark because I don't think that's really 3 out of 6, having looked at it again. Yeah, there's no own knowledge here about Kristallnacht at all. There's no evidence of provenance, usefulness, reliability and purpose past them saying it's a civil servant. So Yeah, there are things missing here. Why did the Nazis want to blame the German people is my big thing that I've put. Also, again, people putting don't, it's do not. And then for their second question, some German working class people benefit from Nazi rule because there was more jobs available. Okay, grammatically, not good. Hitler promised work and bread, which people got. So working class had a better lifestyle. I like that they've put quotations around work and bread, although I wish they'd said where they got that from, because it's from Hitler's 1932 presidential campaign. Men got jobs in factories so they could build things for the Nazis. Bosses weren't allowed to fire them on the spot. Now, that's some own knowledge, so I do like that bit. People had to be Aryan to be able to work. So some people didn't benefit. Again, that's own knowledge. It's all about being Aryan in Nazi Germany, so that's good. But again, did not. Non-Aryan males in Germany didn't benefit as much because Aryan males were taking most of the jobs. So they didn't have an equal chance of getting a job if they weren't Aryan. Right, that's a very long-winded way of saying something, and I think that's because the person who wrote it, if they're honest, probably didn't have any facts to back up what they were going to say. How did non-Aryan people not benefit? How do you know this? Where are the stats that you've looked at come from? Now, what I think this person was trying to do is talk about the unemployment statistics that we looked at in lessons. So we have a look. I can't remember how many millions of people, but if you go back over the lesson PowerPoint, so if you ask me to email it to you, or you can find it on the internet as well, there's a graph of how rapidly unemployment goes down in Nazi Germany. And I think this person's talking about how by, I think it was 1936 or something like that, or 1939, unemployment was down to 500,000 people, which for a country the size of Germany would sound incredible. And the reason is because it wasn't credible at all. And actually the only people who were included in the statistics were Aryan men over the age of 25. I think it was married men as well. And so I think that's what the person's trying to talk about. So some own knowledge would have made this a better answer. I mean, they've got some own knowledge there, and I do basically understand what they're saying, so I've given it a 5, but I think I'm probably being a little bit too nice there. Key messages are there, but there's just not enough subject knowledge. Okay, and so finally, this is pupil 3's answer. As you can see, lots of green on this one. Not perfect, but getting there. So let's have a quick look. So their answer for question 1, this is a source question about Kristallnacht. I'm not surprised by this source because it says that the police supplied SS men with axes, house-breaking tools and ladders. And I know this is reliable because the Nazis controlled the police. Now, I like this first sentence for 2 reasons. It gets straight to the point. I'm not surprised by the source. It links in information that they've learned from the source. So all of this bit here about this bit here, axes, tools, ladders, and I know it's reliable from the police. So that's good. I like that bit. I like that they've added elements of the source into their sentences. Keep that up. The provenance of the source is an anonymous letter written in 1938 by a German civil servant about Kristallnacht. It is useful in showing that there is another side of the official Nazi report. Its purpose is to provide a neutral report about Kristallnacht. Now, this was peer assessed by one of my year 11s who's decided to give it 5 out of 6. I don't know if I would give this 5 out of 6 necessarily. If we look at this answer, they're talking about reliability of a source, which is always useful. But again, where is their own knowledge? Where is the information about how many Jews were killed, why it happened, when it happened? There's just not enough there for me personally. So I think there are a few bits and pieces missing from this to make it a 5 out of 6. And let's have a look at their essay answer. So I think that some people, such as Aryan men, benefited from Nazi rule because of the Strength Through Joy programme. Fantastic, own knowledge. However, working class women did not. Aryan men and their families benefited from the Strength Through Joy programme. Nazis believed they needed to keep their workers happy to get the most out of them, so they allocated leisure time where their Strength Through Joy programme provided activities. For example, 11 million people visited the theatre. Lovely, brilliant piece of own knowledge there. I don't know why it's been highlighted in pink. That's me doing that. Yeah. However, many people did not. Oh, this is why. This is the own knowledge paragraph that I'm confused about. However, many people did not benefit from Nazi rule because they only believed Aryan men could work. Jews' jobs were given to them, and women and men from other cultures weren't allowed to work, so they couldn't, don't put couldn't, put could not earn money. Overall, the only people who benefited from Nazi rule were Aryan men and their families, because whilst working, they provided with 3 accommodations, meals and leisure. Now, I gave this 6 out of 10, and I think that that's appropriate because there is quite a lot of own knowledge here, but their argument is quite one-sided. So they've got stuff about the Strength Through Joy programme, and they've got a lot more for that side than they do about how it didn't. Again, I think that this person needs to have a look at their own knowledge for both sides of the argument, which we're about to do now. Okay, so this is what we call a gold standard answer. So if I were an examiner looking at your paper, this was what would 100% get you 6 out of 6 because there's enough own knowledge in there. So this is the answer that I would put to this 6-mark question. This source is not surprising for the key reason the Nazi government had a hold on German people in 1938 that meant that the truth of the Night of the Long Knives Kristallnacht would have to be told anonymously and would only be believed outside of Germany. So I've started to touch on each of the aspects that I'm going to talk about in here, and I've talked about propaganda. The source shows that it was, in fact, the SS who planned and carried out the attacks on the 9th of November rather than an outburst of anger against Jews that spontaneously happened. Now, this is me using my own knowledge. I'm showing you that I know more about Kristallnacht than the sources show me because I'm saying the exact day that it happened rather than just in November. I'm also starting to talk about, again, linking that I know that these are the same thing, adding my own knowledge in there, subtly, but doing it that way. The Nazis told the German people and the whole world that the government had nothing to do with the attacks that killed 100 people and saw lots of Jewish homes and places of worship destroyed. Again, showing that I've got my own knowledge. The source shows the truth that the attacks were planned by the government and the SS led the riots, not the German people. Given the large amount of anti-Jewish propaganda that was being spread by the Nazi Party in 1938, that the government would plan Kristallnacht is not surprising. So I've linked back to the question at the end of my paragraph. Have a look at this. See, if you want to, go back over the other answers and compare them to this one to see what you could add to your own answer. Okay, so this is my mega 10-mark question answer. It's up to you and your teacher if you're at school, or it's up to you if you're at home, whether you want me to read out this whole thing to you. I will, just so that you can read it if you can't see the screen too clearly. But if not, just fast forward through this bit, because it will take me quite a while. So the Nazis introduced a number of policies that benefited the working class of Germany. They improved the country's economy and provided job security for workers whilst improving the leisure opportunities for German families. There was, however, a darker side to being a working class member of Nazi society that led to many having horrible living and working conditions. I think that while some German people had much better lives under the Nazis, the negative changes to working conditions mean that working class people may not have entirely benefited from Nazi rule. The Nazi regime knew that in order to thrive, they needed to create incentives for their working class supporters. In Hitler's 1932 election campaign, he promised the German people work and bread. This meant that the German people would find employment and be able to feed their families after so many years of economic uncertainty. To a certain extent, the Nazis did fulfill their promises. By flaunting the Treaty of Versailles, Hitler created employment opportunities by increasing the number of soldiers from 100,000 in 1933 to 1.4 million in 1939. Projects such as the Autobahn created employment opportunities for working class men. Although workers no longer had had security of trade unions in their workplaces, the Nazi alternative, the German Labour Front, in brackets DAF, made sure that workers could not be fired on the spot. The Strength Through Joy programme was an opportunity I'm supposed to say 2, but it says 4. No, it's supposed to say 4, but it says 2. Nazi workers to go on holiday, take trips to the theatre, and have a good social life. These changes show that the Nazi policy understood the importance of keeping the German working class happy. These are some of the ways in which some working class people did have a nice life in Nazi Germany. There are, however, numerous reasons to believe that the working class did not benefit from Nazi rule. Although there was work, the restrictions on the hours a person could work and the pay they received were removed, meaning that some German workers were working long hours and in terrible conditions. Through the DAF, German workers were banned from protesting for better pay or conditions. Those who did were arrested. In some cases, workers were stopped from trying to find better jobs. Some workers found themselves away from home and working in what could be described as labour camps. Because the amount a worker could earn was restricted, many workers compared their life in the 1930s to life during the Depression. Volkswagen was created as the people's car. German workers could put their money aside a little by little each month and then receive a new car. However, the money people saved was confiscated if they missed even a single payment, and no families received a car after production was stopped in 1939 when the war started. This is an example of how the Nazi promises to the working people seemed brilliant on the surface but were actually empty. This is why the German working class did not benefit under Nazi rule. Overall, I think that the promises made to the working class people of Germany made it seem as though their life was improving for them, even though in many cases it was not. Unemployment went down, but only because men over the age of 25 were included in the statistics, and the conditions that people worked in were sometimes awful. The Strength Through Joy programme was an improvement on the types of leisure activities that people had, but a lack of representation at work and the empty promises made by the regime showed that working class people did not really benefit under Nazi rule. So, the reasons this is a good answer, it uses loads of own knowledge. I'm using stats in my paragraphs, I'm using numbers, dates, I'm giving examples for every point that I'm making, and then I'm using those examples to further my argument. So if we have a look at my introduction, I mean, it's not the perfect introduction, but what it does do is explain that I'm going to talk about both sides, and you can see that I already have made up my mind. I know the answer to this question already, so the negative changes to work conditions mean that working class people may not have entirely benefited from Nazi rule. So you can see that I think that overall they probably didn't, but I'm going to weigh up both sides. My first paragraph, I use Treaty of Versailles and all of the bits and pieces, bringing together my own knowledge in a point, evidence, explain, judgment, link paragraph. Now, I've got a lot more evidence than the answers that you saw beforehand, and my explanations are longer because I'm using my own knowledge. If you need to, pause this and make notes on some of these facts. They are in your books if you're in year 10 though, so you should know this. On the other side, I'm arguing about all the horrible working conditions and all the restrictions using the examples. Now, the one thing I want to take away is the Volkswagen initiative the Nazis made is really symbolic of how working class people were treated in Germany, and it represents, I don't know, I think it just represents the way the German people were treated. They were promised all of these amazing things if they followed Hitler, but actually they were pretty much left with nothing. And so I think that that's representative of everything. And also, in my conclusion, I'm bringing in my understanding of how the Nazi party knew what they were doing. They knew they had to get the German people on side, but actually they weren't really willing to keep their promises to the working class people. So there you go. Have a look at the answers again if you need to. Go back and pause these, but make sure by the end of the lesson, if you're in a lesson, or by the end of your time watching this video, that you've either redrafted or you've written now 2 brilliant answers to those questions, and then bring them in to either me or your teacher to mark.